Hey, folks. Yeah, this literally just happened. The Karen Reed civil lawsuit. And so I found it. And so going live. Going live with it. Hello, folks. Hey, yo. Yeah. I'm going straight into it. Karen Reed civil suit. Let's hear. Hello, folks. Good day. Hello. Yeah, the news just, it broke minutes ago over at X, and yeah, so I'm not I'm not prepared, but we're just going to go through it. 46 pages. I would assume there are. Oh, all right, folks. It's a lot of text. Let's see here if I can make this a little bit bigger. Yep, I could. Yeah, Carol, I know that Brian Walsh pled to counts 2 and 3. And let me just say, that's a brilliant move from the defense. Because with that, he pleads guilty to a lot of things that the prosecution wanted to bring in the trial to prove guilt of murder. Now, when he pleads guilty to it, that part of the trial is gone. Well, sort of. It depends on the judge. So I believe, and I mean, despite all the fuss-to-cluck from the investigators in that case, they had kind of with all the sideshow, they had a strong case. But now it seems like the defense ripped it from them, from the prosecution. So it will be really interesting when the trial starts, because now they only have the murder charge. All right, folks. But that's for Brian Walsh. This is the Karen Reed civil suit. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Bristol Superior Court, blah, blah, blah. Karen Reed, plaintiff, versus Michael Proctor in his personal capacity. Sergeant Yuri Bukhenik in his personal capacity. Lieutenant Brian Tully in his personal capacity. Plus Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, and Brian Higgins, defendants. Now, what do they mean, Michael Proctor in his personal capacity? Well, they want to do. Because if they sued them as cops, all of a sudden you have all the immunities in the world for them in their work capacity. So it seems like they're going, yeah, personal capacity. So this will be amazing. This will be at the very least very, very. Yeah. Dave, if you want to tag along, I'm at StreamYard. You should be able to get in here if you want to. All right. Complaint. Introduction. For 3.5 years, plaintiff Karen Reed was wrongly accused of homicide and subjected to suspicion, arrest, 2 prosecutions, and public condemnation, all resulting from the gross misconduct of the Massachusetts State Police and those working in tandem with the MSP to shield from liability the party or parties responsible for the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe III. Now, after being acquitted of all charges related to Mr. O'Keefe's death, Ms. Reed brings this action to recover for and address the actions of those actually involved in Mr. O'Keefe's death and the law enforcement officers who abjectly failed to ensure that justice was sought and served in the aftermath of January 29th, 2022. We have defendants with a footnote 1, complaint footnote 2. Footnote 1. The Massachusetts State Police and Town of Canton will be added as defendants after presentment is made pursuant to GLC 25 at paragraph 4. Plaintiff intends to move to consider this action with the related action, Estate of John O'Keefe et al. Versus Reed et al. Civil action. You can't defend somebody defame somebody in a court pleading. So please tell me she accuses those other cops. I can't remember their names and their wives. Yeah, but much of this, what she alleges, up here, in personal capacity. So yeah, they have to get around that. Thank you, Dave. So they have to get away from that. Now, if I remember correctly, even though it was said in court, there are ways to, if those things are said out of court. But are you talking about the defamation case they want to bring against Ken Reed and Aiden? Because no, this is Ken Reed suing the people, all the people. All right, let's continue. Karen Reed did not kill her then boyfriend, Mr. O'Keefe. Rather, in the early mornings of January 29th, Mr. O'Keefe was killed in defendants Brian and Nicole Albert's home at 34 Fairview Road in Canton, quote-unquote house, in an altercation during a late-night house party with other defendants, collectively the house defendants, after a night of heavy drinking. All right. Yeah, here we go. They are not sugarcoating this. This is, this will be the house defendants responsible for Mr. O'Keefe's death, some of whom had professional experience with police investigations, concocted a plan immediately after the altercation to avoid culpability and to frame Karen Reed. Rather than call first responders for help, among other actions, the house defendants conducted a Google search for information about, quote-unquote, how's long to die in the cold. Moved Mr. O'Keefe's body outside and placed him on the Albert's front lawn near the road to make it look like Mr. O'Keefe was hit by a vehicle and that he died in the snow without ever coming into the house that night. Mr. O'Keefe's body remained on the Albert's lawn until Karen Reed found him later that morning. Did I say who's Karen? We will. They should sign it all the way down here. Karen Reed by attorneys Sheehan, Finney, Bass, and Green, Worksome, Jackson, and Quinn LLP, with Mr. Seligson and Alan Jackson. So those are the current lawyers for Karen Reed. She switched a law firm recently. All right, let's get back to good question. 3. From the beginning, investigators from the MSP allowed the House defendants to direct the investigation away from themselves and towards Ms. Reed. The House defendants were a well-connected and close social group with strong ties to law enforcement. The Alberts are a prominent family in Canton, and the investigating police officers knew them well. The lead investigator for MSP, Michael Proctor, grew up in Canton and resides there to this day. He has been and remains close personal friends with the Albert family. House defendant Brian Albert was a longtime Boston Police Department officer, and House defendant Brian Higgins was an agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF. Wait. What do you mean was? I say quit. He's not an active agent. Okay. Placed on desk duty. Okay. All right. Interesting. Let's get back to reading. Dun, dun, dun. Adhering to the unwritten rule of quote-unquote protecting their own, known as the thin blue line, Proctor and his MSB colleagues intentionally disregarded the obvious and compelling evidence tying the House defendants to Mr. O'Keefe's murder. Specifically, Mr. O'Keefe's injuries were consistent with a physical alteration. He had bruises and lacerations on his face and a deep gash to the back of the head, suggesting that he was punched and fell backwards, hitting his head on a ridged surface. He also had dog bite wounds and scratches on his right arm and forearm. Yeah, this will be in the civil case here, if this will be consolidated. Rules of evidence are slightly different in civil cases. Now, it is a higher bar for some reason for experts in civil cases than it is in criminal cases for some odd reason. We learned that from the Brian Walsh case when the judge expressed that. So, which means that if the defendants in here tries to use the same experts as in the trial, they might run into trouble. Let's just say that. Let's continue. Equally evident, Mr. O'Keefe did not have a single injury consistent with being struck by a vehicle. He did not have any broken bones or even a bruise on his legs, feet, arms, shoulders, torso, back, ribs, or anywhere below his neck that a medical examiner would otherwise expect to find on a person struck and killed by an impact from a 3-ton vehicle. 3 metric tons, 6,000 pounds. And to erase any doubt, the Commonwealth's own medical examiner, the pathologist who conducted the autopsy for the Commonwealth, concluded that Mr. O'Keefe's body showed no signs of a vehicular strike. 5. Despite that, Proctor and others shielded the House defendants by intentionally sidestepping fundamental investigatory procedures, propelled by the House defendants' false statements, including that Mr. O'Keefe, quote-unquote, never went into the house. Proctor reported in text messages just hours into the investigation that the House defendants weren't going to get any quote-unquote shit for this because, quote-unquote, he's, as in Brian Albert, he's a Boston cop. And that Proctor was determined, quote-unquote, to make the investigation cut and dry by bringing, quote-unquote, charges against the girl. Indeed, Proctor makes his intentions clear in writing. Ken Reed has, quote-unquote, 0 chance of skating. She's effed, end quote. This pronouncement was a mere 16 hours after Mr. O'Keefe's body was discovered on the Albert's lawn, and Proctor had not even walked into the house. 6. True to his promise, Proctor and his colleagues did not search the house for blood evidence resulting from the gash to the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head, or for fingerprints, or for DNA evidence. Proctor did not search the house despite the fact that Mr. O'Keefe was discovered without a winter coat, without the hat that several witnesses said he had been wearing that night, and without his left shoe. At Proctor's direction, the house was never processed by a criminalist or even photographed. No member of the MSP, including Proctor, set foot inside 34 Fairview for nearly a week. The police did not examine or take evidence from the Albert's German Shepherd that was in the house on January 29th, a dog that had a history of attacking other dogs and people. 7. Neither Proctor nor I had to speed a loogie. Yeah, you don't want to see that. Sorry. Okay. 7. Neither Proctor nor any of the MSP troopers conducted physical examination of the house defendants for evidence of involvement in the altercation, such as marks on their hands, knuckles, or face, or bruises on their bodies. They did not seize or search the house defendants' phones. They conducted only perfunctory, unrecorded conversations with Proctor's friends and acquaintances without any attempt to corroborate their stories. They permitted would-be witnesses to communicate with each other and coordinate their stories before any formal interviews. Yeah, we learned that in trial 2, that Jen and what's the other chick's name? I don't care. I don't know. Sat down, put notes. Where are those notes? Where did those go? And that's interesting because that can be used in a civil suit. Okay, so you sat down and you got everything together and you wrote everything down. Where's the notes? Oh, you destroyed them? Oh. So, yeah. In civil suit, destroying evidence as phones and stuff can be used, depending on the court's ruling, of course, but it actually can be used as a sign of guilt. Let's continue. They allowed critical evidence to be manipulated in some instances and outright destroyed in others. In short, by focusing the investigation solely on Ms. Reed as an implicitly directed by the House defendants through the misrepresentations they made to police, Proctor and his colleagues disregarded and failed to obtain pertinent interviews and other critical evidence from the House defendants that cannot now be recovered or recreated. 8. Proctor also secretly communicated with the Alberts on his personal phone. Oh, yeah. Let's just say everything on Proctor's phone is fair game. His personal phone. Oh, you stupid motherfucker. Deliberately back-channeling those communications to circumvent his state-issued device and used his sister as a conduit. For instance, on multiple occasions, Proctor disclosed critical and confidential information about the investigation to his sister, who passed that information to her close friend Julie Albert, Brian Albert's sister-in-law. Julie Albert then passed the same information to the rest of her family and the House defendants. Now, folks, this is Karen Reed's story. I assume the defendants and their attorneys... Kerry Roberts. Thank you. I assume there will be an interesting reply from the people. I can't wait to dissect that one. Included Julie Albert's promise to buy Proctor a quote-unquote thank you gift for handling this investigation in a manner that intentionally avoided implicating the House defendants and singularly focused on Ms. Reed. Hey, Chloe Albert's revenge, member for 14 months. Yay! Proctor didn't have the class to signal. Folks, there are in places around the world, they have sometimes problems recruiting cops, so they lower the standards. And if you're too smart, you don't get to be a cop as well. Now Proctor has this seems to have this unique combination of incompetence, stupidity, misogyny, and allegedly racist. And he was a cop for quite some time. But let's get back to this. Proctor then went so far as to manufacture evidence to ensure that Miss Reed, not his friends and fellow law enforcement officers, was blamed for Mr. O'Keefe's death. This included planting evidence at the scene, on Mr. O'Keefe's clothes, and on Miss Reed's vehicle to support the false narrative that Miss Reed hit Mr. O'Keefe with her car, even though he knew Mr. O'Keefe's injuries were inconsistent with a motor vehicle strike and consistent with a physical altercation and a dog attack. 10. Far from conducting an objective investigation with integrity, Proctor personally sexualized and dehumanized Miss Reed throughout the investigation. Specifically, Proctor's private communications to his high school buddies, sister, and MSP colleagues that he believed would never be discovered exposed the corruption and bias at the core of MSP's entire investigation. Specifically, only hours into the investigation, in a text chain with 8 of his high school buddies, Proctor stated that Miss Reed is a quote-unquote whack job, see you next Tuesday, quote-unquote R-word, a quote-unquote nutbag, and quote-unquote a babe with no ass. Proctor further ridiculed and derided Miss Reed for her serious medical condition, stating that her quote-unquote balloon notch, quote-unquote leaked poo. In other private text messages to his MSP supervisor and colleagues, Proctor bragged that while conducting a search of Miss Reed's phone, he was looking for naked pictures of Miss Reed. Disappointed, he repeated that there were quote-unquote no nudes so far. In an unfiltered utterance, Proctor revealed his true mindset. Quote-unquote, hopefully she ends herself. And folks, allegedly, disgraced former Trooper Proctor shared nude pictures of Anna Walsh. So, in a criminal case, that would probably not be admitted as evidence. A civil case, it's different. It's different because if they can show a pattern that he shares victims' nudes, then they can connect that to looking for nudes at Karen Reed's phone. So, yeah. Hi, Kitchen Knife Rescue. Yeah, Trooper Proctor has the complete package of an utter asshole. All right, let's continue. 11. Indeed, Proctor's supervisors and the MSP knew about and condoned Proctor's unlawful conduct, and in some instances expressly encouraged this flagrant abuse of power. For example, on one occasion, Proctor's immediate supervisor, Yuri Bukhenik, responded with thumbs up to a text calling Miss Reed, quote-unquote, R-word. Proctor's supervisors and the MSP knew Proctor had a close relationship with the Alberts and that he made no secret of his bias against Miss Reed, demonstrating a clear prejudice against her from the outset. 12. Relying on manufactured evidence, actively ignoring exculpatory evidence, and without investigating obvious signs pointing toward the House defendants, the Commonwealth secured 2 separate arrest warrants for Miss Reed and a knowingly baseless indictment against her, and then wrongfully prosecuted her for murder twice. As alleged below, these unlawful acts not only underlie plaintiff's meritless wrongful death claim against Miss Reed, but they also form the foundation for Miss Reed's claims against the defendants. These acts violated Miss Reed's state and federal constitutional rights, the Massachusetts Civil Rights Act, and well-established Massachusetts tort principles. Hey, it's Cat here. Yeah, you got here in time for the... yeah. Oh. 13. On June 18th, 2025, after a 2-month trial, a jury rejected the Commonwealth's theory, in part because the overwhelming physical, scientific, and medical evidence established that Miss Reed's vehicle did not strike Mr. O'Keefe, and that Mr. O'Keefe's injuries did not come from a vehicle strike. although Miss Reed was ultimately and finally acquitted of all charges related to the death of Mr. O'Keefe. Proctor was fired, and nearly every MSP officer in Proctor's chain of command was disciplined for their egregious abuses and misdeeds. The Commonwealth still has not sought or provided justice, not to the O'Keefe family, not to the community at large, and certainly not to Miss Reed. Yeah, I've seen a list of every cop and investigator surrounding this case, and almost all of them has retired. One got fired. They they transferred. They got into real trouble. They should have all been fired, by the way. 14. In response, the Commonwealth has offered only empty platitudes instead of solutions. The head of MSP, Colonel Jeffrey Noble, stated, quote unquote, quote, the events of the last 3 years have challenged our department to thoroughly review our actions and take concrete steps to deliver advanced investigative training, ensure appropriate oversight, and enhance accountability. Under my direction as Colonel, the state police has and will continue to improve in these regards. Seriously, Mr. Noble, if most of that department is shit, it's really hard to not improve. Right? In an interview with the Boston Herald, Noble acknowledged the systemic nature of MSP's conduct in Miss Reed's case. Quote, I'm eyes wide open to a culture issue that I have concerns with as it relates to Trooper Proctor. End quote. These hollow words do nothing to right the devastating wrongs that have been visited on Miss Reed. Colonel Noble's words confess a sickness deep in the marrow of the MSP, but offer no remedy, no medicine, no relief to someone so brutally victimized by it. On Wednesday, March 19th, 2025, following the public disclosure of Proctor's illegal and unethical conduct related to the Reed investigation, the MSP trial board found Michael Proctor guilty of a Class A violation, which included, quote, that he was biased in his dealings with a homicide suspect and or brought otherwise himself and the Massachusetts State Police into disrepute. Hey, Rhonda. Hello, folks. Good to have you here. Good to have you here. Hit the thumbs up, folks. You know the drill. You know the drill. 16. Miss Reed's life was not merely turned upside down by the MSP and the House defendants' misconduct. It was forever changed by the defendants' transgressions and wrongdoing. The years of uncertainty and unimaginable emotional distress have left lasting scars that will never heal. At the same time, neither Mr. O'Keefe nor his family has received justice. His killer or killers still walk free. By asserting her claims against MSP, Proctor, his supervisors, the town of Canton, and the House defendants, Miss Reed seeks at minimum to confront and redress these wrongs and others. More importantly, she seeks to force the Commonwealth to fulfill its duty to stop law enforcement from trampling the innocent to protect their own. And now they're going to parties. Plaintiff Karen Reed is an individual residing in North Dighton, Massachusetts. Defendant Michael Proctor is a former Massachusetts State Police trooper residing in Canton. He is being sued in his personal capacity. Defendant Bukhenik is an MSP trooper residing in Stoughton, Massachusetts. He is being sued in his personal capacity. Tully, also. And Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Jennifer McCabe, Matthew McCabe, Brian Higgins. Now, couple lives in Norwood, two still lives in Canton, and Higgins lives in Sandwich. Jurisdiction and venue, we don't need to. Facts common to all counts. Before his death, Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed were dating. On the evening of January 28th, 2022, Mr. O'Keefe and Miss Reed went out for the night. They first went to C.F. McCarthy's in Canton, where they had several drinks. They then went to the Waterfall Bar in Canton. There they went up with a group of acquaintances, including Brian Albert, his wife, Nicole Albert, Brian's brother, Chris Albert, and his wife, Julie, Jennifer McCabe, and her husband, Matthew McCabe, and Brian Higgins. The group of acquaintances had several drinks and planned to continue the party back at the Alberts home in Canton at 34 Fairview Road. House defendant Jennifer McCabe told John O'Keefe that he should come to the house. The group had overlapping social relationships. At the time, Brian Albert was a Boston police officer, as was Mr. O'Keefe, though they did not know each other well. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins were close friends. Higgins was an officer at the ATF. He also was permitted to keep an office at the Canton Police Department alongside Brian Albert's brother, Canton Police Detective Kevin Albert. Kevin Albert had a professional and social relationship with Michael Proctor. Brian and Nicole Albert's son, Brian Albert Jr., and his friends were already at the house for Brian Jr.'s birthday. In addition, Colin Albert, Brian Albert's nephew, was present. Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe had never been to the house before January 29th, 2022. They arrived in front of the Alberts home around 12:20 a.m. Miss Reed was reluctant to attend the party for several reasons, including that she was unsure whether they were at the correct location and whether they were even welcome to the late-night party. Mr. O'Keefe got out of Miss Reed's SUV and indicated that he would check out the party and report back to her. Mr. O'Keefe walked toward the front door, garage door area of the house and entered one of the two doors. A period of time passed without any word from Mr. O'Keefe. Miss Reed, who was still hesitant to join, presumed that Mr. O'Keefe intended to stay, and therefore she left to go home without him. Now, the timestamps in this will be in... Yeah, it will be interesting to see how... Because if they're going to say that she waited for him several minutes, how did the drive back to the house take just a few minutes? It will be interesting to see what they will argue. Let's just say that. Therefore, she left to go home without him. At some point after entering the house/garage, Mr. O'Keefe was involved in a physical altercation either inside the house or garage. During that altercation, the Albert's German Shepherd attacked him, and Mr. O'Keefe sustained multiple dog bites and scratches on his right arm. He also suffered an incapacitating counter wound on the back of his head. Mr. O'Keefe's head wound was caused by falling backwards and striking a ridge surface. The Albert's garage contains such surfaces. By contrast, the head wound could not have been caused by a vehicle strike or falling backward onto a flat, cold lawn like the Alberts. Because of their knowledge of criminal investigations, the Alberts, the McCabes, and Higgins knew that calling for medical care to help save Mr. O'Keefe's life would trigger immediate and irreversible risk of their own criminal exposure. Therefore, at least the five of them agreed on a simple plan to exonerate themselves and implicate Miss Reed. I'm not so sure about that. I still to this day say that if there was a plan, it was to any plow driver who happened to drive past there that night. But Carrie Reed found John first. That is my opinion, but they are going with this one. They're going with this one. They would tell anyone who inquired Mr. O'Keefe never entered the house and hide evidence that he was there, including his body. Sometime during the night, they repositioned a Ford Edge vehicle at a spot adjacent to the front lawn, which obscured the view of that area of the lawn from potential passers-by. At some point further in the night, they carried or dragged Mr. O'Keefe's body to the same area in the yard, close to where one or more of them later claimed Miss Reed dropped off Mr. O'Keefe earlier that night. The plan was devised to make it appear that Mr. O'Keefe has been struck by Miss Reed's vehicle and then died as a result of exposure to the cold. Mr. O'Keefe was either dead when the House defendants left him on the Albans lawn, or he died shortly thereafter. After the physical altercation, Higgins left the house and drove to the Canton Police Department in the middle of the night. He later told investigators he had to do some administrative work, but then changed his story, subsequently stating that he drove to the station because he had to move cars in the parking lot due to the snowstorm. However, video from inside the station, which they tried to hide from the world, shows Higgins walking down the hallway and surreptitiously entering offices while wearing a hoodie to obscure his face. Surveillance video outside reveals Higgins transporting a large bag from one vehicle to another before driving away. Oh, sorry. You should see that better. Hey, look at that. Thank you, Dave. Gifting memberships. Thank you so much. That is so nice of you. Yeah, it's... if anybody wants to become a member and watch all my members-only content and all the stuff and support this channel, it's $3 a month. Just $3. But thank you so much. It went to Tammy Fayette, Stephen Weishaupt, County Tennessee Girl, Ducking Felonies, and Vicky Hat 82. Yay! Congratulations. All right, let's continue. After leaving the police station, Higgins and Brian Abbott continued to coordinate their stories by calling each other multiple times in the early morning hours. The butt dials. Remember those? They called butt dialed each other. What was it? 7 times each? One of them like, hey, I had relations with my wife on your fucking phone. I mean, seriously. The amount of butt dials that these people blamed for calling each other that night, they have more agile assholes than adult film stars. Okay? Let's just say that. And ultimately spoke with each other on the cell phones at 2:22 a.m. Later, both Brian and Higgins denied the existence of these phone calls. And then when confronted with their existence by a quote-unquote separate law enforcement agent, FBI, at a separate proceeding, they coordinated the same exact lie, falsely claiming the multiple calls and answers were just butt dials. However, 5 minutes after the Higgins-Albert call, Miss McCabe performed a Google search on her phone at 2:27 a.m. How's long to die in cold? Misspelling the first word. Yeah, I don't really care if you believe 2:27 or later that morning. If somebody asks you, as Jan McCabe say, to Google hypothermia, you don't you Google the word hypothermia? Why the phrasing of how long does it take somebody to die in the cold? At that point, folks, nobody supposedly knew that John was dead. They might have drawn some inferences and logically, but it's a damn weird search, regardless. Misspelling the first. Oh, okay. Miss Reed began the search for Mr. O'Keefe on January 29th, just before 5 a.m. when she awoke and realized he had not returned home. She phoned House defendant Jennifer McCabe, who already knew exactly what had happened to Mr. O'Keefe. Miss McCabe insisted that Miss Reed drive to McCabe's house rather than driving to 34 Fairview Road, which Reed did. The two of them were then joined by Kara Roberts, and the three of them left the McCabe residence. However, rather than go to 34 Fairview, oddly, Miss McCabe directed them to go back to Mr. O'Keefe's home, where Miss Reed had just come from. After the three of them finally drove to 34 Fairview. Yeah, that's when she didn't take off her shoes. We were good little girls, housewives, twats. We took off our shoes. We were good people. Folks, if somebody's missing and you claim, let's search the house, why would you stop to take off your shoes? It's almost as if they already knew. Yeah, folks, there will be snark. Let's continue. The illogical McCabe-directed route to 34 Fairview was intentional. It allowed the House defendants more time to finish creating the scene and hiding evidence before Mr. O'Keefe's body was discovered on the Albus lawn and first responders arrived. As they approached the house with Miss Roberts driving, Miss Reed saw Mr. O'Keefe almost immediately. She screamed for Miss Roberts to stop the vehicle and jumped from the moving car to run to Mr. O'Keefe. She began rendering aid, including CPR. As the House defendants had planned, Mr. O'Keefe's body was quote-unquote discovered in front of the Albus house near a flagpole and fire hydrant on the left side of the Albus property, as seen from the roadside. The Ford Edge, which had been parked in a position to obscure Mr. O'Keefe's body in the middle of the night, had been moved. While Miss Roberts joined Miss Reed with administrating CPR, Miss McCabe did not help or even approach Mr. O'Keefe. Rather, she sat in the cab of the vehicle, called 911, and reported that, quote, there's a man passed out in the snow. Despite knowing that her brother-in-law, Brian Albert, a police officer and first responders, was just feet away inside the house. Miss McCabe never went into the house or requested that Albert come down to help Mr. O'Keefe. Rather, as Mr. O'Keefe lay dying in the snow, Miss McCabe stood and watched with no fear, urgency, or even concern for her family members residing mere feet away. Yeah. I don't know how you act around your family, or if you even like your family. For the sake of argument, if I drove to my dad and saw a body in the lawn, I would crush the. I would have run through the door to make sure my family was okay. Miss McCabe, her sister is in that house. And nothing. Weird, isn't it? Let's continue. Investigation begins. The CPD were the first on the scene shortly after 6 a.m. At the time, there was no evidence that Mr. O'Keefe had been hit by a vehicle. In fact, the evidence suggested just the opposite. His body did not show signs of trauma commonly associated with being struck by a car. There were no bone fractures or trauma to his lower body, torso, and any other part of his body, as investigators would expect from a vehicle strike. Rather, Mr. O'Keefe's injuries were consistent with being physically assaulted to the face and head and attacked by a dog. For good reason, the ranking CPD officer on the scene, Sergeant Michael Lank, opined on a telephone call captured on a dash cam that Mr. O'Keefe looked like he had been in a fight. And they still didn't go into the house. Moreover, the initial search conducted by Canton police officers revealed that there was no vehicle debris on the lawn of 34 Fairview, let alone any debris at or near Mr. O'Keefe's body. Not a single piece of taillight material was discovered on the lawn that morning or in the roadway, notwithstanding multiple searches and the use of a leaf blower to remove snow. Tellingly, despite the commotion outside, including more than a dozen first responders, 3 police cruisers, 2 ambulances, a ladder fire engine, all with their emergency lights flashing, and at least 2 civilian vehicles, plus Miss Reed's scream upon finding Mr. O'Keefe's body, no one from the Alberts house, including police officer Brian Albert, ever went outside to see what was happening, let alone help. They wanted to avoid scrutiny from the police investigators. Sergeant Lank was a long-time friend of the Alberts and the first law enforcement officer to enter the house. He spoke to the Alberts and the McCabes. Pursuant to their plan, the Alberts and McCabes told Sergeant Lank that Mr. O'Keefe have never entered the Alberts house the night before. The Alberts and McCabe's statements were false. Mr. O'Keefe arrived at and entered the house or garage where he was assaulted, attacked by the Alberts dog, and suffered a fatal injury to the back of his head. Despite Mr. O'Keefe's injuries being wholly inconsistent with the story the House defendants were now telling him, neither Sergeant Lank nor any other member of the CPD searched the house to determine whether the occupants or anyone else were involved in Mr. O'Keefe's death. Nor did they request to search the occupants' cell phones, observe their bodies for evidence of a fight, or even secure the scene where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found. They failed to do so because of bias born of friendship and loyalty in favor of the Alberts and McCabes. After Sergeant Lank returned to the CPD 3 hours after the discovery of Mr. O'Keefe's body and more than 2 hours after being interviewed at the Alberts' home that morning, Miss McCabe called Sergeant Lank to report that she quote-unquote recalled additional information. As part of the plan to implicate Miss Reed and remove suspicion from the House defendants, she falsely told Sergeant Lank that Miss Reed told her twice that morning, "I hope I didn't hit him." More than a year later, at a separate proceeding, the FBI grand jury, Miss McCabe changed her story on this topic yet again. In furtherance of the House defendants' plan, McCabe then falsely reported that Miss Reed outright confessed to hitting Mr. O'Keefe right after she first found him in the snow. Proctor leads. Michael Proctor was assigned as the case officer and had primary responsibility for the MSP investigation of Mr. O'Keefe's death. Sergeant Bukhenik was Proctor's direct supervisor. Lieutenant Tully was the supervisory officer at the Norfolk County State Police Detective Unit, and thus supervised both Bukhenik and Proctor. In their roles, Bukhenik and Tully both knew at all times exactly the extent of Proctor's misconduct in investigating Mr. O'Keefe's death, as described below. From the beginning, Proctor should never have been assigned as an investigating officer, let alone the lead investigator. He grew up and resides in Canton, is a good friend of the Alberts, and had known the family for years. Proctor and Julie Albert, Brian Albert's sister-in-law, had each other's personal cell phone numbers. In fact, just days before Mr. O'Keefe's death, Proctor communicated with Julie Albert about babysitting Proctor's minor child. Proctor's sister, Courtney, was also a close friend of Julie. In fact, Proctor's own mother referred to the Alberts as the Proctor's second family. The existence of this relationship was intentionally suppressed by Proctor and other members of the MSP, including Bukhenik and Tully, in an effort to ensure that the House defendants were protected and that Miss Reed's right to a fair investigation and trial were undermined. Proctor, Bukhenik, Tully, and MSP never searched for DNA evidence inside the house, never looked for ridged surfaces that could have caused a gash on the back of Mr. O'Keefe's head, never inspected the House defendants' bodies for indication of bruises or cuts that resulted from an altercation, and did not search the House defendants' cell phones. This allowed potential evidence to be destroyed, disposed of, removed, or simply become unrecoverable. Proctor's, Bukhenik's, and Tully's interviews of the House defendants were also outside of normal protocol. They were all interviewed either at their home, their family member's home, their lawyer's home in the case of Brian Higgins, their lawyer's office in the case of Brian Jr. and Caitlin Albert, their place of employment or over the phone. These interviews were each untimely, unrecorded, and fundamentally designed to protect the House defendants. And the House defendants took full advantage of it. Specifically, Jennifer McCabe became the point person for the House defendants in providing their false narrative to investigators. She managed and communicated details about the House defendants' messaging and the investigation itself, including visiting Proctor's and other investigators' private residences, mapping out timelines to coordinate statements with other witnesses, leading group text message chains that were later partially deleted, and planning private meetings at all hours of the day and night. Indeed, these were never the acts of innocent witnesses seeking to help investigation concerning the death of an alleged friend. Rather, they were predicate acts of a conspiracy among a group of people with a shared goal of deflecting their criminal exposure onto someone else. The remaining group texts that were not deleted, or that were recovered later, reveal some of their planning. For instance, on the evening of January 29th, Jennifer McCabe texted with her sister, Nicole Albert, that Carrie Roberts, who was present when Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, quote, talked to cops and kept it simple, end quote. Of course, there would be no reason to report back to other House defendants about Roberts keeping it simple, unless what really happened was more complicated. Proctor, Bukhenik, and MSP never sought these communications. Rather, they were obtained by Karen Reed's defense attorneys' repeated motions to compel access to data on Ms. McCabe's iPhone. Later, in group text with Jennifer McCabe and Brian and Nicole Albert, Matthew McCabe suggested having Chris Albert publicize their crafted story to a reporter, saying, ask Chris to ask some questions. Tell them the guy never went into the house. As an endorsement of the plan, Brian Albert responded, exactly. Importantly, the text messages from the House defendants' phones that were ultimately recovered and that provide a window into their conspiracy and misconduct, as well as MSP's unlawful investigation, were not the product of CPD or MSP's investigative work. Rather, based on media reports raising serious questions about MSP's investigation and the House defendants' role in Mr. O'Keefe's death, another separate law enforcement agency, the FBI, began its own subsequent investigation. We don't know if the FBI was already there investigating other things due to the Sandra Birchmore case, and they just stumble upon this. But they cross over the cases. They do cross over. So we don't really know if the FBI was already there or if they actually went there because of this case. That investigation, and not the MSP's, resulted in obtaining the House defendants' phones, taking statements from the House defendants, and conducting a separate proceeding, all of which MSP refused to do itself. Indeed, the evidence procured by FBI investigation demonstrate that the House defendants' conspiracy and unlawful conduct, as well as MSP's bias and corruption. Proctor and Bukhenik initially interviewed the McCabes and Brian Albert on January 29th at the McCabes' home at 12 Country Lane in Canton, at which time they again falsely stated that Mr. O'Keefe never entered the Alberts' home. Bukhenik and Proctor did not interview Nicole Albert and Brian Higgins until February 3rd, 2022, and did not interview Chris and Julie Albert until February 10th, nearly 2 weeks after Mr. O'Keefe's death, and more than a week after Ms. Reed was arrested and charged. Before both interviews, the McCabes and Alberts continued to coordinate their stories, as evidenced in group texts. Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully likewise failed to conduct a meaningful investigation into Higgins' involvement. When Proctor and Bukhenik interviewed Higgins on February 3rd, Higgins presented the troopers with a select set of self-curated text between himself and Miss Reed. They learned that Higgins and Miss Reed had been exchanging flirtatious texts, and that Higgins reported at least one instance in which Miss Reed and Higgins had kissed while at Mr. O'Keefe's house mere weeks before his death. Rather than pursuing Higgins as a possible suspect, Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully neglected to investigate the matter further. They never interviewed Higgins again, even after surveillance video revealed Higgins was suspiciously hiding his face in the halls and the parking lot of CPD at 1:30 a.m. on January 29th. The video contradicts Higgins' statements about his actions that night. However, not only did Proctor, Bukhenik, Tully, and MSP not investigate what Higgins was doing and what was in the bag, but they went so far as to hide this video from Karen Reed and her criminal defense attorneys for years. Reed's defense did not receive these videos until after Reed stood trial for the first time, and even after the FBI investigation revealed late-night phone calls between Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, MSP failed to pursue either witness further or seek a full forensic extraction of Higgins' phone, or even a simple call log from his cellular provider. When it was revealed that Ms. Reed's defense team requested the preservation of Brian Albert's and Higgins' phones in order to forensically image them, this request was allowed by the court. Both men got rid of their phones within days of one another. Higgins went so far as to drive to a military base on Cape Cod, remove the SIM card from the phone, cut the SIM card with scissors, and destroy and dispose of the phone and card separately in two dumpsters and then drive back home. Their destruction of their phones eliminated potentially incriminating communications between them and was a direct result of Proctor's, Bukhenik's, and Tully's intentional refusal to collect important investigative evidence that would be exculpatory to Miss Reed. Even after learning about the destruction of both witnesses' cell phones, MSP investigators had other avenues they could have used to pursue evidence, such as cell toll records, or simply interviewing Brian Higgins and Brian Albert to inquire about the nature of the late-night communications. They intentionally ignored these avenues as well. Not only did Proctor fail to probe his friend's stories, he coordinated with them through his sister. Proctor spoke to Courtney multiple times a day and knew she was in close contact with and providing information to Julie Albert. Julie and Courtney called each other many times between February 1st and 2nd, and at least 67 times between February 1st and September 6th, 2022. For example, as he prepared to question Chris and Julie Abbott on February 10th, Proctor told his sister Courtney that the interview was not quote-unquote not a big deal. Courtney told Proctor that Julie Abbott had been nervous and wanted to give him a thank you gift after the interview. To avoid scrutiny, Proctor instructed Courtney to tell Julie to give the gift to his wife, Elizabeth Proctor. Proctor shared investigatory details with Courtney before they were public. In the same instance referenced above, when his sister informed him that Julie Abbott had been, quote, so nervous before the interview, instead of investigating further, he shrugged it off, laughed, and asked why. But Proctor knew exactly why Julie Abbott was nervous. He sought to reassure her by telling Courtney that, quote, it was fine, just a quick convo. And then after the interview, Proctor spoke to Julie on his personal cell phone in an unreported conversation. Proctor never treated the Alberts as witnesses in the murder investigation. He treated them like the family friends that they were. At one point leading up to some of the interviews, Miss McCabe asked Nicole Albert if she had heard anything more about the investigation. Confident she would learn more from Julie Albert, again through Courtney, Nicole Albert responded, quote, we'll get more info, Tom. Don't want to text about it. House defendants did not, quote-unquote, want to text about their activities and communications because they tried to hide and or lie about them. For instance, it was discovered in the second criminal trial that Miss McCabe had lied in her sworn testimony in the first trial about not visiting 34 Fairview with Kerry Roberts on January 30th on their way to Michael Lang's house. However, while they did not text about this meeting, McCabe's cell phone location data obtained later by Reed's defense reveals that she did in fact visit 34 Fairview just one day after O'Keefe's death and lied about it. Why would you lie? Consciousness of guilt. The McCabes, Alberts, and Higgins all told the same false story to investigators in their interviews, and Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully accepted their coordinated statements without making efforts to corroborate their stories. Instead of taking the routine, objective, and necessary steps of investigating the McCabes, Higgins, and the Alberts, Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully focused exclusively on Miss Reed as a suspect from the start of the investigation, despite substantial evidence exonerating her and implicating others, just as the House defendants intended. Proctor seized Miss Reed's cell phone and her SUV within 30 minutes of interviewing her on January 29th. He arrested her 72 hours later, before reviewing any surveillance from the bars or ring camera footage, before interviewing exculpatory witnesses, and before the medical examiner's official conclusion that the manner of death could not be determined, and that there were no injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's body consistent with a vehicle strike. Much to Proctor's surprise, through the FBI investigation, his contemporaneous text messages were discovered. Among them, Proctor texted with his high school friends on the evening of January 29th, the day he began his investigation. He told them that the MSP had already determined the Alberts were not going to receive any scrutiny about Mr. O'Keefe's death, even though the MSP had not at that point visited the crime scene or been inside the Alberts' home, and had performed only a cursory interview of the McCabes and Brian Albert. Proctor told his friends that Mr. O'Keefe had been hit by a car and had not been in a fight, despite the fact that Mr. O'Keefe has suffered no injuries consistent with a vehicle strike, but he did have injuries consistent with a fight and dog attack. Proctor rejected the friends' belief that Brian Albert, the homeowner of the property where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, would, quote-unquote, receive some shit, instead agreeing with another friend's assumption that, quote, you guys are out to make it cut and dry since it involves cops. Proctor revealed that he had already decided he was going to put serious charges on Miss Reed, that she was, quote-unquote, effed, and that there were, quote, zero chance she escapes. From the outset, Proctor was determined to pin it on the girl. Proctor's supervisors were aware of his bias and conflicted relationship in this investigation. They didn't have to guess. Proctor told them. He told them he knew the Alberts. Text messages from Proctor to Bukhenik and other MSP troopers show Proctor had decided to focus suspicion on Miss Reed to the exclusion of everyone else. He told the troopers that Miss Reed was R-word and that he was searching her phone for nudes of her. In the text chain, Tully Bukhenik liked Proctor's text, describing Miss Reed as the R-word. Bukhenik received Proctor's text and never reprimanded Proctor or addressed his improper bias and conduct. Because he was determined to put serious charges on Miss Reed, Proctor ignored the fact that the Commonwealth medical examiner could not conclude that Mr. O'Keefe's death was a homicide, determining instead that the manner of his death could not be determined. The medical examiner also refused to conclude that Mr. O'Keefe died as a result of being struck by a vehicle, and later testified at trial that his injuries were not consistent with the car strike. Proctor later admitted that, in his entire career, he had never seen a homicide investigation where the medical examiner could not determine the manner of death. But he remained undeterred in his quest to shot Miss Reed. As he later admitted, the medical examiner's refusal to rule the death a homicide did not matter to him, quote unquote, because either way Miss Reed was going to be charged. Proctor made this investigation, quote unquote, cut and dry, by manufacturing a case against Miss Reed. A crucial first step was to ensure that the crime scene and evidence was not secured. This was in violation of MSP policy and well-established best practices for critical incident investigation. Specifically, the MSP Crime Laboratory require proper processing of evidence at major crime scene, including, quote, crime scene photography and evidence processing and recovery of latent fingerprints, footwear, and tire track evidence, end quote. Neither the MSP troopers involved in the investigation nor the CPD police officers on the scene secured the Alberts home or the area where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found. The MSP did not take any photographs of the house, including any part of the yard where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, until February 1st, more than 3 full days later. No photographs were ever taken inside the garage of 34 Fairview. This intentional departure from the established protocols permitted Proctor and Bukhenik to generate false incriminating evidence against Miss Reed and give the House defendants time to destroy the actual evidence. By approximately 2:30 p.m. on January 29th, before he had even met or interviewed Miss Reed or seen her Lexus SUV, Proctor had already ordered seizure of the vehicle at her parents' home in Dighton. By 4:17 p.m., the vehicle was in MSP's physical possession. The vehicle was then towed to the CPD Sallyport. Even though the MSP has at least 2 closer barracks, and Massachusetts was in the middle of an historic nor'easter. Proctor knew he had more leeway to manipulate evidence regarding the SUV at CPD than at MSP's facilities, and he knew he needed to have that evidence in close proximity to the crime scene at 34 Fairview Road. Here we go. What do they say Proctor did? Before the vehicle arrived at the garage, Miss Reed's Lexus taillight had a minor crack, but was intact. The crack occurred when Miss Reed backed into Mr. O'Keefe's car at 5 a.m. that morning as she was leaving to search for him. The incident was captured on video. Bukhenik and Proctor followed the vehicle from Dighton and arrived at CPD at 5:35 p.m., just moments after the tow truck with the Lexus. At some point after the vehicle arrived at the Sallyport, the right rear taillight was almost entirely destroyed. Video taken from different angles in the Sallyport shows Bukhenik, Proctor, Berkowitz, and other individuals near the taillight, but notably, no video captures the taillight's appearance at the precise time it arrived at the Sallyport. The available surveillance video from the Sallyport, as well as a CPD access card swipe log obtained by a separate law enforcement agency, the FBI, reveals seemingly unfettered access to the Sallyport by a myriad of individuals throughout the evening of January 29th, including just before and just after 5:30 p.m. One or more of them destroyed the taillight, secretly took pieces of it into their possession, and then planted some of them in various places at 34 Fairview and on Mr. O'Keefe's clothes. Yeah, so they're going with one or more of them because they really can't say exactly what happened, because mysteriously the surveillance video cuts out. Mysteriously. Ow! Hello, Mr. Jingles. Hey, folks. Mr. Jingles is here. Hello. Oh, look at that. Thank you so much, Kat. Gifted 5 memberships. That is so nice of you. Thank you so much. It went to Kiska Hamlin, Lady Fang, Danielle with little D, Femme Natal, and Nikki Nicole. Hey, you guys now also have access to all my members-only content and your own emojis here on the YouTubes. Thank you so much, Kat. That is so nice of you. Thank you. All right, let's continue. Knowing that there were video cameras both inside and outside the Sallyport, Proctor and Bukhenik worked together to obscure their role in manipulating the rear right taillight, and then ultimately to present false evidence at the first criminal trial. Specifically, Proctor directed Bukhenik to secure video footage from the surveillance cameras located both inside and outside the Salleport garage, which he did. These videos were manipulated in two significant ways. First, a critical 42-minute portion was deleted from the footage from the Salleport front wall camera. The portion from 5:08:02 p.m. to 5:50:50 p.m., which included the exact time Miss Reed's Lexus arrived at the garage. This footage would have shown that the taillight was intact. Second, footage from the Salleport backwall camera was inverted, which made the right side of Miss Reed's vehicle appear to be the left side and vice versa. Another camera, main driveway side exterior, captured the back end of the Lexus as it arrived at CPD, but was too grainy to decipher the condition of the passenger taillight. The videos from inside and outside the Salleport, and Proctor's request for Bukhenik to obtain it, was intentionally hidden from Karen Reed and her defense attorneys for more than 2 years to avoid scrutiny. The video was then sprung on them immediately before and during the first criminal trial. One driveway camera's footage was not revealed to the defense until just prior to the start of the second trial. In fact, Bukhenik presented one part of the video during his direct testimony under questioning by the Assistant District Attorney. Adam Lell. Bukhenik narrated the video to the jury, correctly identified that Proctor was at the rear of the vehicle but claimed that he never approached the right rear taillight area of the vehicle. That testimony, however, was entirely false. As he well knew, the video that Bukhenik authenticated as fair and accurate was actually neither fair nor accurate because it had been inverted. Proctor was actually behind the right taillight for a significant period, but because it was inverted, it appeared in the video that he was behind the left taillight. They hoped this would allow Bukhenik to lie about this issue at trial without detection. With this video and Bukhenik's false testimony, the MSP, Proctor, and Bukhenik attempted to mislead the jury in order to conceal the tampering with and planting of taillight material. Proctor and Bukhenik also took taillight pieces from the Salleport, brought them back to 34 Fairview to plant them in the location where Mr. O'Keefe's body was found, and then falsified various documents in an attempt to hide their conduct. Okay, so now they're actually naming Proctor and Bukhenik. Bukaki. Yeah, the falsified various documents is the evidence bags with the wrong name on it, evidence bags with the wrong amount of evidence in them. It was so stupid to see. In warrant applications to the Stoughton District Court and Norfolk Superior Court for searches of Google's electronic records, ring videos, Miss Reed's phone, Miss Reed's vehicle, cell tower records, and other sources of information, Proctor swore he seized Miss Reed's vehicle from a parent's home at 5:30 p.m. on January 29th and had the vehicle towed to the CPD. Reports shared by the Dighton Police Department in 2023 reveal that the Lexus was towed from Dighton at 4:17 p.m. That is an hour and 13 minutes wrong. Proctor's assertion that he seized it at 5:30 p.m. was intentionally false to hide the fact that the car was in police custody for 73 minutes longer than indicated in his sworn affidavits. Proctor maintained that false narrative because it would hide the exact time frame where he had the opportunity to remove pieces of the taillight from his Reed's vehicle and bring them back to the house so that he could later claim the pieces had been there since approximately 12:30 a.m. on January 29th. However, unbeknownst to him, driveway video from the Reed residence in Dighton and the report written by Dighton Police Report revealed Proctor's lie and revealed the true and accurate time the Lexus SUV came into MSP's possession. Whew. Hello, folks. Good to have you here. Hit the like button. Do all the YouTube things. Subscribe if you haven't yet. 83 here. Proctor also deposited the SUV taillight piece that he and others removed from the vehicle in the sally port on Mr. O'Keefe's clothes. Proctor retrieved Mr. O'Keefe's clothes from the floor of the hospital where he was pronounced deceased. Instead of securing the clothes in a sealed container or bag, as protocol requires, Proctor and Bukhenik drove them around in his car all day and then placed them in the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office for at least 6 days, where they were accessible to Proctor, Bukhenik, and other MSP troopers. Trooper and Bukhenik failed to create a log to document the chain of custody of the clothing. Therefore, and by design, there is no record of when, how many times, and under what circumstances Proctor and Bukhenik touched, manipulated, handled, or otherwise tampered with that clothing. Hey, Paladin, did you get... Why do you show up in green? Because you are now a member. You might have been gifted one in a prior stream, or you got one recently. Or you actually are Mr. Jingles. Hey, Mr. Jingles, do you want to say hello to the people? Look how happy he is. He is a happy kitten. Look how happy he is. Yeah, you remember. Yeah, you remember. And then your name shows up as green. All right, let's continue. The MSP Evidence Submission Handbook dictates that chain of custody begins at the time of collection. And that the collector seal evidence packages as soon as possible after collection to ensure integrity of evidence items and limit loss of transient evidence. Here, in violation of MSP stated policies, the chain of custody for all of John O'Keefe's clothing, as well as dozens of pieces of taillight material, does not begin until March 14, 2022, nearly 2 months after it was collected. When Proctor finally submitted it to the MSP Crime Lab, at some point before providing those clothes to the crime lab, Proctor and or Bukhenik placed pieces of the SUV taillight on them, where they were then identified by the crime lab in 2023. Hey, Marielle! Thank you for your $2. Kudos for sticking up for Uncle from the BS on X. Yeah, folks. You know, Ian Runkle had his 24-hour stream this weekend, and he came close to 100,000 to sick kids. And among others, Karen Reed's lawyers, Jackson and they donated their ties that they had on during the trial. And those two items alone, I think, was somewhere around $13,000 to the fundraiser. And what do these mentally ill anti-FKR do? They go after Ian. They slander the fundraiser. If any of you guys are here listening or in the replay crew, there's a special place in hell for you guys to actively discourage people from donating to sick kids. Folks, even in the Depp v. Heard trial, we were not nice. I mean, the sides were really, really not nice against each other. There were some really, really nasty words said. But when Captain Corey wanted to get to 100,000 subscribers, let's get the microphone back. They joined in because they knew this is separate from the differences in the Depp v. Heard trial. This is a dying kid's last wish. So, the case out the window, let's help Captain Corey. The mentally ill imbeciles at the anti-FKR don't care. They go after sick kids. And this only shows that they are not well. They can't see the evidence in this case because they determined early on, regardless if they are related to some of the cops. I mean, there are so many fake accounts out there, it's ridiculous, and they all more or less mimic each other. So it's probably a dozen people with 10 accounts each, something of the sort. But these people are so filled with hate, they would rather see children die than have something positive happen through people who reported on this case, favorable to Karen Reed. It's evil, proper, undisguised evilness. All right, let's continue. But thank you so much, Maria. Thank you. Yeah, I have Ian's back. Ian is a really, really nice guy. He's one of the good ones. And so he avoids the strongest of words that are more suited. I only aspire to be one of the good ones. I have no problems with using any words against these motherfuckers. Okay? All right, now let's continue. Here, in violation of MSP's stated policies, the chain of custody for all of John O'Keefe's clothing. Yeah, we already read that. Yeah, we already read that. Proctor also planted pieces of glass on the bumper of Miss Reed's SUV while it was in his possession at the CPD Saturday Port garage, which he then claimed to have recovered later on February 1st. Proctor planted this evidence to make it look like these shots originated from a cocktail glass that Mr. O'Keefe was holding when he exited the Waterfall bar. Yeah, remember that one? The glass shots he claimed was not from the cocktail glass. It was not. He took the wrong shots. Yeah, it's. But this is the stupidity of former trooper Michael Proctor. He can't even plant evidence correctly. He's that stupid. Evidently, Proctor did not plan on Karen Reed's defense attorneys insisting on forensic testing on the glass charts, which showed that they did not match the cocktail glass in Mr. O'Keefe's possession. In fact, the 5 glass pieces originated from multiple different sources. One shot of the glass of the pumper did match another piece of glass that had been in Proctor's possession during the investigation. The only way for the glass to have ended up on the SUV bumper is that Proctor planted it there in an attempt to connect the vehicle to the death of Mr. O'Keefe. Yeah. Ian is at 98,699. Let's see. Let me see here. So I will actually bring up that. Dun, dun, dun. Extra life. Yeah, here I will post the link to the fundraiser. So if you have a few bucks to spare, don't give it to me. Give it to the fundraiser. There, it's pinned on the top of the chat. I will post it in the description of this stream for you guys in the replay crew. All right, let's continue. Other aspects of the conflicted and corrupt investigation. Proctor's, Bukhenik's, and MSP's investigation was rife with other examples of corruption and bias. For example, despite evidence that Brian Albert may have had video surveillance at the house, neither Proctor nor Bukhenik nor any other member of the MSP issued subpoenas to Ring and any other home surveillance company, and no one questioned any other members of the Albert family about the presence of video monitoring. Proctor and MSP also failed to track down other important witnesses and evidence. For example, Brian Lucky, a town of Counton snowplow operator, turned out to be one of the most significant witnesses in the entire criminal trial. Proctor and his colleagues never spoke to him during their investigation, and only did so once Lochran was interviewed by a separate law enforcement agency, the FBI, and provided statements inconsistent with the MSP's narrative, 18 months after Miss Reed was already indicted and awaiting trial. Specifically, Mr. Lochran drove his snowplow by the house multiple times in the early morning hours of January 29th, including at 2:30 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. He reported that there was nobody on the lawn at 34 Fairview, nor cars on the street in front of the house at 2:30 a.m. Mr. Lochran, I don't know how to pronounce it, believes he would have seen a body had it been on the lawn where Mr. O'Keefe was found several hours later. Instead, the second time he drove by the house around 3:30 a.m., Mr. Lochran saw a Ford Edge in front of the Albert's home that had not been there an hour before, but which was then part where Mr. O'Keefe's body was later found. Brian Albert drove a Ford Edge at the time. However, the Ford Edge was gone by the time Miss Reed arrived to the house around 6 a.m., and in its place she discovered Mr. O'Keefe's body. Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully never made any effort during the actual investigation to track down Mr. Lochran or any information relating to the Ford Edge. I think Ian agrees with this. If you don't, donations are appreciated, but not necessary. If you don't have the funds, it's okay. It's okay. You can post the link yourselves on your social media. That way you contribute. Don't feel ashamed for not being able to give away money. Never. On this channel, if you're struggling, because it's not that fun out there, the economy. If you're struggling, I forbid you from donating to me. No supers, no gifted memberships, no nothing. Watch my videos. Press the thumbs up. That I'm fine, folks. I really am. I'm really fine. Yeah, do not donate if you can't. All right, let's continue here. Proctor also secretly made efforts to protect other Albert family members during the investigation who may also have had a role in Mr. O'Keefe's death. Witness Julie Nagel told Proctor that Colin Albert, Brian Albert's nephew, had been present at the house of the night of January 28th to the 29th. But Proctor omitted his name from his official summary of Miss Nagel's interview, even though he listed all others who had been present at the house with Colin. When Miss Reed's attorneys filed a motion to obtain Proctor's notes, his handwritten memorialization of the Julie Nagel interview mirrored almost exactly what was typed up in his police report, except for the words Colin Albert. Proctor's interactions with Kevin Albert, Brian Albert's brother, during the investigation also demonstrate his close relationship with the Albert family, as well as his propensity for violating MSP rules and Massachusetts criminal laws. Repeatedly, Proctor used his personal cell phone to speak with Kevin, a CPD officer, instead of official channels when he coordinated interviews of witnesses, even though CPD was recused from the investigation. Further, in the middle of Proctor's investigation in the summer of 2022, it was discovered that Proctor and Kevin Albert were out drinking together and driving in Proctor's cruiser on Cape Cod. At the end of the night, Kevin Albert forgot to bring home his gun and badge and left them in Proctor's cruiser. Their drinking and driving in Proctor's MSP vehicle violated both MSP policies as well as various Massachusetts criminal statutes and further highlights the conflicted nature of MSP's investigation. Moreover, because of their close relationship, Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully were together with CPD in hiding certain videos from Karen Reid's criminal defense team. Specifically, upon information and belief, MPD and CPD collaborated to keep exculpatory surveillance video from Karen Reid's criminal defense team in preparation for the first trial. Those videos captured Brian Higgins' activities in the CPD parking lot and inside of the police station shortly after the physical altercation at the house that led to Mr. O'Keefe's death. They demonstrated that Higgins' statements about his post-house party activities on the night of Mr. O'Keefe's death were not accurate. Yeah, didn't he say he left before John came there? But all of us went directly to the police station. But the cameras at the police station shows he wasn't there until 1:30 a.m. Additionally, upon information and belief, CPD set its auto-delete function for saving certain surveillance videos from the Sallyport to 30 days, therefore assuring the immediate destruction of likely additional exculpatory evidence. The 30-day auto-delete setting conflicts with the fact that CPD videos were shared with the defense over the course of 3 years. Therefore, either the setting was changed to prevent the defense expert from auditing the footage, which is when the 30-day setting was discovered, or the footage was obtained within 30 days of January 29th and withheld from the defense. Both options are really, really bad for Proctor and Bukhenik and Tully. Ow! Mr. Jingles, please stop booping with your claws. It really, really hurts. Miss Reid was arrested on February 1st, 2022, pursuant to a criminal complaint charging her with manslaughter, among other charges. She was required to post $50,000 for bail. The court imposed several other conditions of release, including loss of her driver's license and stay-away orders from the O'Keefe family and John O'Keefe III's home. Miss Reid was later re-arrested on June 9th, 2022, after being indicted for second-degree murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. Her bail was set at $100,000 by the Norfolk County Superior Court. In February of 2023, her bail was reduced to $80,000 at the defense's request. Miss Reid was tried twice by the Commonwealth. The first trial started in April 2024 and ended on July 1st after the court ordered a mistrial because of a hung jury. On June 18th, 2025, following another nearly 2-month trial, Miss Reid was acquitted of all charges associated with the death of John O'Keefe: murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. For the first time in 3.5 years, Karen Reid was able to leave court knowing that the forces aligned against her had failed to convince the jury to buy their deception. Beginning in January 2022, the defendant's actions have had profound effect on Miss Reid. She lost her employment and income. She lost her professorship. She lost her private health insurance. She lost her car and her driver's license. She lost her house, her reputation, both personally and professionally, was utterly destroyed. She incurred multiple millions of dollars in debt for legal fees, and additional millions in expert fees and costs. In addition, after being arrested twice, jailed twice, and tried twice, she has suffered years of intense stress and emotional harm, worried that she would be imprisoned for the rest of her natural life for a crime she did not commit. Miss Reed suffers from both Crohn's disease and multiple sclerosis. As documented under seal with the criminal court, Miss Reed has undergone tens of surgeries to manage her illnesses prior to January 29th, 2022, and endured a blood infusion just months before Mr. O'Keefe's death. Sorry. In the aftermath of the charges to arrest and during both trials, Miss Reed suffered a well-documented exacerbation of her symptoms amid the stress, anxiety, and emotional and physical impacts of being wrongfully accused of murder. While fighting for her freedom against a corrupt prosecution, Miss Reed underwent dozen upon dozen of documented medical procedures and treatments to attempt to address her health issues. The defendants concocted a plan, executed that plan, and framed an innocent woman, and they are now responsible for these extraordinary damages Miss Reed has suffered at their hands. Proctor wrote more than 1/3 of the police reports in this case, testified at the state grand jury 3 separate times, interviewed every member of the Albert and McCabe families, had possession, at least until March 14th, of all of John O'Keefe's clothing and all of the taillight pieces found broken from the housing, processed Mr. O'Keefe's Chevy Traverse the day after Miss Reed was arraigned, had access to and reviewed all the ring videos, had access to and reviewed the surveillance from C.F. McCarthy's, had possession of all the CPD Sallyport and driveway videos, and numerous other critical investigative activities. And yet, once evidence of Proctor's conflicts and lies became public, he was extricated from this case in an effort to hide him from the jury and sanitize the compromised investigation while Miss Reed was forced to trial not once but twice. Ultimately, Michael Proctor was relieved from duty and transferred out of the detective unit of the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office on July 7th, 2024, mere days after the conclusion of Miss Reed's first trial. Proctor was terminated from MSP on March 19th, 2025. Upon a release from the district attorney of more implicating text messages from Proctor's phone, on October 18th, 2025, Proctor officially ended his appeal with the Civil Service Commission. Yeah, I did a video about, for you who don't know, hi, I'm Nick. I do labor and employment law. I'm a union jurist. In order for, because Michael Proctor was represented by the police union's attorneys, and they abandoned him after he lied to them about what was on his phone. Now, I explained that further in that video, but that rarely, if ever, happens, that the police union drops somebody. Even if they lie, it's extremely rare. Extremely rare. Go check that video. On September 23rd, 2024, an MSP internal affairs investigation found jury Bukhenik, quote, failed to perform his supervisory duties in an ongoing investigation. On July 7th, 2025, Bukhenik was transferred out of the NDAO detective unit and reassigned to an administrative role in another division. On October 18th, 2024, Brian Tully was disciplined and reassigned from CPDU and stripped of his detective designation. Tully was given special dispensation by Norfolk County District Attorney Michael Morrissey to continue detective work on the Reed case despite his demotion because of his behavior on this case. Yeah, Michael Morrissey, you fat pig. Just go away. DA Michael Morrissey, how many criminals have you protected during your decades as a DA? How many corrupt cops had under your watch, Morrissey? How many should have been in prison, but you covered for them? How many? It's not a question in my mind that he has done it. The question is, how many? Upon information and belief, MSP troopers David DiCiccio and Jeffrey Kotkowski were also disciplined for their misconduct associated with MSP's investigation of Miss Reed. Counts. Okay, 4. Footnote 4. After making presentment pursuant to GLC 258, paragraph 4, Miss Reed will add counts against A. MSP for negligent training, supervision, and retention of MSP troopers, including Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully, and B. the town of Canton for negligent oversight of the investigation into Mr. O'Keefe's death and of its own officers and facilities. 109. The preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully violated Miss Reed's Fourth Amendment rights by engaging in the malicious prosecution of Miss Reed by causing her to be seized pursuant to legal process unsupported by probable cause. The criminal proceedings against Miss Reed terminated in her favor when she was acquitted of murder, manslaughter, and leaving the scene of an accident with a death. Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully caused Miss Reed to be seized without probable cause, as described above, including but not limited to by leading, handling, and participating in the O'Keefe investigation, even though Proctor was conflicted due to personal relationships with various witnesses, suspects, and potential suspects, which conflict led to Miss Reed's unlawful treatment. Handling the investigation, even though Proctor had an extreme and personal negative bias towards Karen Reed, which bias led to Miss Reed's unlawful treatment. Violating MSP rules, policies, and procedures in all aspects of the investigation. Planting, fabricating, and manipulating evidence. Falsifying documents, preparing false affidavits, and committing perjury. Failing to secure evidence at the crime scene. Obtain evidence, timely and appropriately interview suspects, and investigate the Alberts, McCabes, or Higgins, and allowing them to destroy potentially exculpatory evidence. Failing to consider and present exculpatory evidence to prosecutors and the grand jury investigating Mr. O'Keefe's death, such as the evident dog bite injuries on Mr. O'Keefe's arm, and evidence that his injuries was caused by an altercation and not a vehicle strike. Following her indictment by grand jury, Miss Reed was arrested without probable cause, forced to pay a $100,000 bond to be released from custody, and required to comply with numerous pre-trial release provisions. These post-arraignment deprivations of her liberty constitute seizures under the Fourth Amendment. Those deprivations continued during Miss Reed's second trial, in part because of Proctor's false testimony at Miss Reed's first trial. Among other things, Proctor falsely testified that A. When he first saw the taillight on Miss Reed's car at Miss Reed's parents' house in Dighton, it had large pieces missing, and the shattered taillight displayed at the first trial, as photographed on February 1st, 2022, was in the same condition as on January 29th. We kind of know that is false, because the video when she backs out from John's house, she backs, you see the scuffle between the car, and then she drives away, and then she hit the brakes, and the rear right taillight shines red. The condition of the right rear taillight in this, afterwards in the evidence, shows a completely demolished rear right taillight. That would not have produced any light. So we kind of know that something happened with her car, with her rear right taillight. And there are very few suspects who could have done it. And it's Proctor, Bukhenik, former police chief, and maybe a few others. For me, it's not even it's not even a question anymore. He testified that he and Bukhenik never touched any part of Miss Reed's vehicle when it was stored in the CPD Sally port. He testified that he retrieved taillight pieces on subsequent searches at the Alberts home when he knew he had deposited or arranged for someone to deposit taillight pieces at the property. Chris and Julie Abbott were his loose acquaintances rather than friends, which was, stupid. His statements in sworn affidavits all claiming the Lexus was seized at 5:30 p.m. and that he arrived in Dighton at 4:30 p.m. were typos. As it turns out, he lied. As a proximate result of his misconduct, Miss Reed was wrongfully prosecuted for Mr. O'Keefe's death and made to defend herself in 2 trials in the Superior Court for Norfolk County, resulting in the loss of employment, reputational damages, and millions of dollars of legal expenses, as well as serious emotional and physical distress and injury. In addition to an award of damages for these harms, Miss Reed is entitled to her attorney's fees under blah blah blah. Count 2 against Bukhenik and Tully. Preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. A supervisor is liable under 42 U.S.C. 1983. That's the 1983 claim, by the way. Other people make better videos than I can ever do about the 1983 claims, so go watch those. When the supervisor supervises, trains, or hires a subordinate with deliberate indifference towards the possibility that the subordinate's deficient performance will result in deprivation of an individual's constitutional rights. Bukhenik and Tully knew, or should have known, that there was a grave risk that Proctor would fail to investigate the Alberts, with whom he had a close personal relationship, which he had disclosed. They also knew, or should have known, that there was a grave risk Proctor would wrongly seek to have Miss Reed charged, given the manifest biased evidence in his text messages, which was sent to Bukhenik, among others. Bukhenik and Tully could have taken easy, available steps to avoid a constitutionally deficient, malicious prosecution of Miss Reed. Those measures include, but are not limited to, replacing Proctor with an unbiased investigator that had no personal relationship with anyone involved in Mr. O'Keefe's death. Safeguarding the crime scene and the physical evidence, including Mr. O'Keefe's clothing and 47 pieces of taillight material, to prevent anyone from planting, manufacturing, or manipulating evidence. Initiating timely searches at the Albert House and for quickly seizing the cell phones and other forms of electronic evidence in the possession of the Alberts, the McCabes, and Higgins, which would have prevented their later manipulation and destruction. By not taking any of these measures, Bukhenik and Tully permitted Proctor and Tully permitted Bukhenik to violate Miss Reed's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures, and thus themselves violated Miss Reed's Fourth Amendment rights. In these ways and others, Bukhenik's conduct constituted condonation of or acquiescence to Proctor's behavior or gross negligence amounting to deliberate indifference. In these ways and others, Tully's conduct constituted condonation of or acquiescence to Bukhenik's and Proctor's behavior or gross negligence amounting to deliberate indifference. As a proximate result of their breaches, Miss Reed was wrongfully prosecuted for Mr. O'Keefe's death, resulting in the loss of employment, reputational damages, and millions of dollars of legal expenses, as well as serious emotional and physical distress and injury. In addition to an award of damages for these harms, Miss Reed is entitled to her attorney's fees under 42 1988. Count 3 to 42. Conspiracy to deprive Miss Reed of her Fourth Amendment right against Proctor, Bukhenik, Tully, the Alberts, the McCabes, and Higgins. Proctor, Bukhenik, Tully, the Alberts, the McCabes, and Higgins shared a common design and acted in concert to frame Miss Reed for Mr. O'Keefe's death. As part of their concerted efforts, and among their many other misrepresentations, the Alberts, McCabes, and Higgins agreed with each other to tell investigators that Mr. O'Keefe never entered the house, that they did not see Mr. O'Keefe in the house that night, and that Miss Reed made inculpatory statements on the morning of January 29th. When they made these statements, the House defendants did so only because they were aware that Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully would also act similarly by solely investigating Miss Reed. Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully knew or should have known that the statements made to them by the House defendants were false, and that obvious and easily obtainable evidence existed demonstrating Mr. O'Keefe went into the house where he was involved in a physical altercation during which he was beaten up, fell back gashing his head, and attacked by a dog. Instead, because of their close personal and professional ties to the House defendants, Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully agreed with each other to use the House defendants' misrepresentations as a predicate for an implicit direction to conduct an investigation that solely targeted Miss Reed, to the exclusion of everyone and anyone else. In furtherance of this plan, among other unlawful conduct, Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully agreed to continue to handle the investigation, even though they had personal relationship with suspects in the murder, which led to unlawful and favorable treatment of potential suspects. To continue to handle the investigation, even though they had biases against investigating the House defendants because of the House defendants' ties to law enforcement. To continue to handle the investigation, even though they had exhibited an extreme and personal negative bias towards Karen Reed. To violate rules, policies, and procedures in all aspects of the investigation. To plant, manufacture, and manipulate evidence, falsify documents, and commit perjury. To not secure evidence at the crime scene, to not investigate and obtain available evidence or timely and appropriately interview suspects, and to not investigate the Alberts, McCabes, or Higgins. The McCabes and Alberts coordinated their efforts through text messages, phone calls, and conversations. Higgins and Brian Abbott coordinated their efforts through telephone calls and texts on their phones, which were later destroyed or discarded. Finally, Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully coordinated with Alberts and McCabes through Proctor's sister, Courtney, who communicated frequently with Julie Albert. I have to say here, using that, this is the Karen Reed opinion about this case. This 134 here, I suspect it will change when they get access to, if it still exists, within iPhone, Apple, that they get access to all the call logs, all of them. And whatever Proctor, because if they get Proctor's personal phone, they can get to other people's personal phones. Acting pursuant to the plan, Proctor and Bukhenik interviewed the McCabes and Brian Abbott in a cursory manner, and all at the same location, midday on January 29th, and Nicole Albert on February 3rd. Proctor and Bukhenik only interviewed Higgins once at his attorney's home, and did not secure or search his phone or search for communications between him, the Alberts, and McCabes. Proctor and Bukhenik did not search the Alberts' phones or home, where there was likely evidence of Mr. O'Keefe's murder. Brian Abbott and Higgins destroyed or discarded their phones, destroying evidence of the murder and cover-up. As a result of the conspiracy between and among them, Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully never investigated the House defendants, and instead Miss Reed was wrongfully arrested and prosecuted in violation of her Fourth Amendment rights. Proctor, Bukhenik, Tully, and the House defendants acted in unison and had a peculiar power of coercion over Miss Reed, because Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully were the state police employees investigating Mr. O'Keefe's murder, and the House defendants were able to direct that investigation solely toward Miss Reed because of their personal and professional connections to Proctor, Bukhenik, and Tully, and their superior knowledge of police and criminal investigation as a result of their own work in and connection to law enforcement. Why wasn't Courtney added to the list of defendants? I don't know. I can't answer that. I honestly do not know why not. Maybe they're hoping she will testify. I don't know. The proximate result of Miss Reed's wrongful prosecution was her loss of employment, reputational damages, millions of dollars of legal expenses, and serious emotional and physical distress and injury. We already read that. It's the end of every chapter here. Count 4. Massachusetts Civil Rights Act against Proctor, Bukhenik, Tully, Alberts, McCabes, and Higgins. The preceding paragraphs are incorporated herein by reference. Proctor, Bukhenik, Tully, and the House defendants interfered or attempted to interfere with Ms. Reed's exercise or enjoyment of her rights under the federal and Commonwealth constitutions and laws through threats, intimidation, or coercion. Among other acts, by manufacturing and planting evidence, not securing the crime scene, not searching the Alberts' home or the Alberts and Higgins' phones, and ignoring exculpatory evidence such as the dog bite injuries and lack of injuries consistent with a vehicle strike. Proctor and Bukhenik caused Ms. Reed wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution, and thereby interfered and attempted to interfere with the rights under the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution and Article 14 of the Massachusetts Declaration of Rights. By falsely representing that Mr. O'Keefe never entered Albert's house, and by relocating his body to the location on the Alberts property where they would claim Miss Reed dropped off Mr. O'Keefe, the Alberts, the McCabes, and Higgins caused Miss Reed's wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution. Brian Albert and Brian Higgins also caused Miss Reed wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution by destroying or discarding their phones, eliminating exculpatory evidence. The House defendants thereby interfered and attempted to interfere with Miss Reed's rights under the Fourth Amendment and Article 14. Miss Reed's wrongful indictment, arrest, and prosecution were intrinsically coercive under Massachusetts law. Moreover, the House defendants and Proctor's, Bukhenik's, and Tully's conduct amounted to threats, intimidation, and coercion designed to force Miss Reed to give up her defense and plead guilty to a crime she did not commit. As a proximate result of defendant's action, same as above. Count 5, common law malicious prosecution against Proctor, Bukhenik, Tully, the Alberts, the McCabes, and Higgins. Now, why don't they go after Fat Pig? The immunities for DAs and cops in general, and even judges, it's basically impossible unless they find some text between Fat Pig and Tully and Bukhenik and Proctor. Fat Pig is safe, sadly, from prosecution or lawsuit. By manufacturing and planting evidence, not secure. That's the same. That's the same as above. These criminal proceedings were instituted with malice, as evidenced by Proctor's, Bukhenik's, and Tully's knowledge that it was based on false evidence. Proctor's, Bukhenik's, and Tully's bias and ill will towards Miss Reed, and for the improper purpose to protect Proctor's friends and acquaintances, the Alberts. The criminal proceedings terminated in Miss Reed's favor, where she was acquitted, and by falsely representing that Mr. O'Keefe never entered the Alberts house, and by relocating his body to the location. Okay, now they are repeating the same things here. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. It's the same civil conspiracy. And yeah, it's more or less the same facts here in all accounts. Ms. Reed respectfully requests a jury trial on all matters so triable. Prayer for relief. Wherefore, Ms. Reed respectfully requests that the court grant her the following relief. Enter judgment in her favor and against each relevant defendant on each count of this complaint. Award her damages in an amount to be calculated at trial, along with pre- and post-judgment interest, costs, and expenses. La 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 la. Signed. Whew! That took more or less exactly 2 hours. 46 pages and 172 things. Whew. Now, luckily, I'm used to reading, not. I'm used to reading a lot of heavy documents, maybe not speaking them out loud. So my mouth is kind of dry. Ken Reed will have to undergo forensic psychiatric exam because he's claiming emotional distress. I don't know the Massachusetts, but I would suppose that you already have a psychiatrist. So it's not like the new defendants here in this lawsuit can say, no, we want you to go to that one. Because if she already has one, that person can testify. So I don't think she has to undergo if they can show she has this history of psychiatric or therapy or psychological help. Oof. Yeah, when I'm reading these things, I have a hard time following the chat. I know you have been very active, and you have had questions. When I notice them at the corner of my eyes, I try to answer them. But yeah, folks, this will be interesting because now we will wait for the reply from Proctors, Bukhenik, Tully, Brian and Nicole Abbott, Jen and Matt McCabe, and Brian Higgins. They will all go in there with their own attorneys. And here's the thing. And this is, we've seen it in other trials with co-conspirators. When things fall apart, somebody will tell on the others. Oh, okay, folks. They can make us sit for an eval with their own expert psychologists. That's why Amber had to be evaluated by Dr. Curry. Yeah, that's yeah. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, that's actually that's correct. That's very, very correct. All right, folks. We are over 2 hours in, and my mouth is dry, and Mr. Jingles keep attacking my shoulder and attacking my hand and stuff. Everybody, thank you for joining in on this reading. Thank you to Chloe Albert's Revenge for being a member for 14 months. Thank you to Dave for gifting 5 memberships. Thank you to Kat for gifting another 5 memberships. Thank you to Marielle for $2, a super chat. Whew. All right, folks. I did not expect to stream this week at all. I have a few videos I'm going to post throughout the week. Judge Simpson will be posted at around 6 p.m. Oh, Judge Simpson. There are people who came up at opposite sides, and that they had been there 7 times before since 20. So in a year and a half, they have been before Judge Simpson 7 times. This is the 8th time. So that will be posted. I'll probably do it as a premiere at 6 p.m. Eastern. And oh boy, yeah, I can't reveal too much about it, but oh, you're gonna like it. You are going to like it. All right, folks. Thank you again for showing up. Hit the like, hit the subscribes, do all the YouTube things, and Karen Reed case. And the Aidan Kearney case, the Canton PD, Norfolk County, keeps delivering the most glorious of clusterfucks. And I'm here for it. And hopefully you will be here for it as well, with slight snark attacks and commentary and some cursive words. So from me, Mr. Jingles, you all have a good one. And I will see you all in the next stream or video. Okay? See you.